All right, what's up, everybody? Joined by Justin Connors, creative director of 8 Prime Esports, and Zach Wigal, executive director of Gamers Outreach. I kind of put Zach on the spot here a little bit because apparently I forgot to tell him this entire conversation is live on LinkedIn. But thank you so much for joining us anyway. Definitely saw you bobbing your head a little bit to that music. So shout out again to Guille. Thank you for creating that for us.
Yeah, impressed by these tunes, man. This is good. It sounded like a video game soundtrack, actually.
Well, that was exactly it. I literally went to him, like he and I were literally just grabbing a couple beers, and I'm like, "Hey, do you mind helping me out with something?"
Nice.
And he's like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "Something that kind of feels like 90s, like comic book, like cartoon, or like a little bit of video game, like almost anime feel." And he's like, "Okay, I can do that."
Yeah,
And he just cranked that thing out in like a day. And I'm like, it blows my mind how talented some people are, because I don't have that skill, you know?
Yeah, not to get too much on a tangent, but I was thinking the other day about how much I wonder if my current musical taste is really influenced by the games that I played. Because I love rock. I love hard rock, big Metallica fan. And I was thinking back about like, a lot of the games I played were pretty heavy soundtrack wise, like Command and Conquer. Remember Red Alert back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
And then like even StarCraft has like a lot of metal, like hard rock tracks in the background. So I vibe with that for sure. Yeah.
No,
Did Halo 2's rock was it Halo 2 or 3 that had that? Was that? I think it was the first Halo.
Yeah. Recording with Steve Boggs, right?
Yeah.
Was it Halo 2 or Halo 3 that he jumped on the soundtrack?
It's one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the first. I can't remember which one there's like a video somewhere with like Marty O'Donnell and they're like recording with Steve Vai.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the video game scene generally has a ton of like rock metal influence. Even the Boo Monster stuff, some of the Final Fantasy games, like tremendous. Like Otherworld from Final Fantasy X is like a real heavy metal track. Anyway, sorry, that's it.
No, I mean, honestly, that's a really great segue, because what I was going to kind of start with is just like kind of ask you, how you kind of got started in the video game industry and tell us a little bit about Gamers Outreach. But if I remember, a lot of that actually comes back to a Halo tournament.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that was a good segue. So I've been playing video games, probably pretty much as long as I can remember. A lot of it had to do with my dad. He was a computer science major and worked in engineering, basically, and had a bunch of computers around the house. I don't know if he would have identified himself as a gamer, nor was that, I think, as much of a cultural term at the time. But he was always playing some game. My younger brother and I ended up on the computer, and we would play games. Growing up, it was a thing. My parents got me a Super Nintendo. It was Nintendo 64 where I like really got hooked, and it was just sort of, as soon as my parents introduced me to games, it was all downhill from there. I would order Nintendo Power, Game Informer. I mean, I remember when I was like 10 or 11 years old, we'd walk into the video game store, and my like career dream was to work at GameStop. I was like, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that in the industry. Like when I was 13 years old, I'm like, as soon as I'm old enough to get a job, I'm applying here at GameStop, and I cannot wait to like just sit here all day and talk to people about games. And I've been doing that for a period of time.
That's always something that's super interesting to me, is like, what were people's like childhood goals for careers? Because I only remember ever having one, and it was terrible. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I wanted to be a crash test dummy.
A crash test?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I might have actually been younger. I might have been like 3 or 4, but I had this like really cool toy set, and it like had a car, and it would like launch it into a wall, and then like the crash test dummy would like blow up, and the car would blow up, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
and I just remember being like, no, I don't want to be the scientist that like does that experiment. I want to be the actual crash test dummy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a job with a lot of career longevity.
I don't think it would have. And thankfully, I found a much better path for myself with what I'm doing now. But that was definitely a weird little vision there.
It's also interesting, too. We had that era where you'd go into a game store, and sometimes you didn't even know anything about the game, but the box art was cool enough that you're like, I'm going to play this. I don't know if it's going to be any good. I think Demon's Sword was the first one I played that. I was like, I'm just going to pick this up and play it. And I didn't like it, but I was like, man, the box art was great, though.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that, too. Like the curated gaming experience. Like this occurs, I think, with food a lot as well. Like if you go to a new city and you ask yourself, like, where should I go out to eat? Well, a lot of us now, the first thing we'll do is pull up Yelp or OpenTable and start trying to figure out, okay, what's the top rated restaurant? as opposed to just like walking into the random place that's next to you, which you might like, but maybe the reviewers don't. So
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been very skeptical about game reviews for that reason lately. I mean, there's some games, and I'm guilty of it as well. Like they influence me for better or worse. But there've been some games that where like the game comes out and the reviews are like, "Oh, this thing's really buggy. Don't play. It's not that great." But to be honest, if I had played myself, I probably would have liked it. I mean, I look back and like there are a handful of games that like I remember. The original Way of the Samurai back in the day. It was like a choose your own adventure. It was one of those games I picked up off the shelf. There was another like samurai. It was like a samurai fighting game called, I think it was called Kengo. It's K-A-E. Kind of, they're kind of clunky, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I think I really feel for game developers because I think like they spend years of their life working on something they're excited about. And then suddenly like one PR review, one blogger can like negate, a few years worth of work, and it's
or the opposite. You can have a game like Valheim right now that blows out the water, and it's it's a small team. It's crazy. So,
yeah, and in fairness too, I mean, social media amplifies a lot of that as well, right? Like suddenly everybody's a reviewer, and if you've got even a streamer who has a decent audience who's like, 100%. I'm playing this game Valheim, I love it. Suddenly, like,
everybody.
Yeah, I know it's a so. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely more mechanisms for distributing information now than ever and doing it faster than ever. So there's just a lot of noise, I think, for better and worse sometimes.
I definitely think figuring out how to separate the signal from the noise is very difficult because, I mean, that's even why you have things like reviews aggregators from the start is they're just trying to give you as much information as quick as possible to let you know, okay, the average review is an 80 or an average review is a 60. But like, I mean, I used to write reviews for a while professionally. And when we even came up with how did we want to do our scale, I hated the traditional number scale personally. If you ask me, is this game good? I'm never going to walk up to you and say it's an 82 out of 100. I'm going to walk up to you and say, I like the combat. The map's really cool. The art is kind of clunky. It's really buggy with regards to this one specific feature. But overall, I thought it was fun, and you probably like it if you like this genre. That's pretty much exactly how that conversation would go. So to me, that's how a review typically should be written if it's meant to be consumer focused. I totally understand there's a different argument to be made if you're trying to be like hypercritical about the medium. But even then, that's like its own thing and not necessarily needing a number to be attached to it to begin with, So like it's always been a super interesting conversation to me there.
So I guess the question is, how does this young, aspiring, glorious GameStop employee get to, to the places you got to at a young age?
Yeah, well, I, growing up, played sports, had okay grades, was involved in the like normal, school things, but video games were the consistent pastime. Like when I would come home after sports practice or whatnot, I would want to play video games. And one summer, I ended up getting sick, like my junior year of high school, caught mono, and it wasn't bad enough where I was like in the hospital or anything, but just didn't feel well enough to go outside much, and ended up missing like summer sports practice because of it. And in lieu of that, started playing video games way more often than I had been before. I mean, I was already playing a lot of games, to be honest, but I mean, this particular summer, I just didn't feel well, and I ended up getting really good at Mortal Kombat. And this is like my one esports brag. I think I got into like the top 40 leaderboards out of 30,000 some players on the PlayStation 2 back in the day. Yeah, so that's my like one.
Yeah,
this journal of like all the character combos, like everything you had to look out for. So anyway, I don't mean to boast or get on another tangent.
Hey, that's something to brag about. It's hard to do now. You can't even go online.
I feel like everybody has at least like one obscure kind of brag like that, Like for me, it was like I was like the first person to ever like 100% all the achievements on the game Smite, which cool. That one had like insane lists at the time.
Yeah,
they've made it like 40,000 times harder now, so I haven't even bothered to keep up with it because content comes out every week. But at least the like base stuff, I was like, yeah, I did it first,
Yeah, and the reason it's relevant to the story is that it basically helped me develop an interest in video game tournaments. Like I selfishly wanted to compete in esports events because I wanted to brag to my friends about how good I got in this game. Had I not gotten sick, that wouldn't have happened. So I started organizing these like grassroots video game tournaments. Turns out I was the only person in my friend group who wanted to play Mortal Kombat. Everyone else was playing Halo. I was also like very casually playing Halo. So I started organizing a Halo tournament for kids in my high school. And a few days before the event was supposed to happen, a police officer in my hometown found out about my event. And he belonged to this organization called the Parents Television Council. And I have no idea what they do now, if they're still around and whatnot, but like basically he and some fellow officers had been hosting like various seminars where they go out and talk to parents about content and media and what may or may not be appropriate for kids of certain age groups. Well, this guy is like not a fan of the idea of like kids coming together in a high school to play Halo. So they called our school district superintendent. I don't know if he got actually got a phone call. Funny enough, I don't need to go into the details, but like he got a phone call from someone who was actually trying to help us find like some t-shirt security for this event I was hosting. Cause like hundreds of kids, I had like gone to local high school parking lots. I was hustling, putting flyers in people's windshields, kind of organizing one of my area's first ever esports tournaments. And so we were looking for like somebody to come by just to check on things. And it turned out the guy who answered the phone was this particular officer. And he's like, well, that's kind of wild. I'm surprised your school is allowing you to host a Halo tournament. Are you guys aware Halo's an M-rated game and has mature content? And like, I mean, listen, man, I'm not looking for your opinion. I just want to know if you've got somebody who can come by to like help out, you know, like you have an intern who needs to put some hours in. Like, he's like, all right, well, I'll get back to you. Let me look around. Well, he doesn't call us back. Instead, he called our school district superintendent and he's like, hey, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's this kid named Zach. He has rented the high school lunchroom this weekend, and him and his friends are organizing a Halo tournament on your school facility. And I wanted you to know about this because and I'm literally quoting his voicemail. He's like, I believe games like Halo are corrupting the minds of America's youth. These kids are training themselves to kill, playing games like Halo. And he literally said that he felt our event was a hazard to both the public safety of the community, and sort of implied that he would like withdraw security from our high school football games if our like school allowed me to conduct this video game tournament. So
I don't even think you'd have the authority to necessarily do that last part, the threat, but who knows?
I mean, yeah.
No, either. I mean, I'm not an expert in that topic.
Yeah, me either.
And I was like 17 years old when this all happened. So I get called. So again, I had like, you know, from the paradigm of a 17-year-old, I had just spent a few months organizing my friends, borrowing like 20 or 30 Xboxes and televisions from friends that I was like really hoping didn't break because I was gonna have to pay them back with my minimum wage job. And like spent a few $100s like renting my school lunchroom, which again, as a 17-year-old, that's like a lot of hours.
A lot of money, yeah.
Stop, right. So I was like, really had felt like I had risk skin in the game while I was trying to put this tournament together. And then we also had like a couple hundred people who had registered in the area. You know, all these people in our local community wanted to play Halo. And we had a couple people on Facebook and MySpace back in the day who had messaged me like, I was planning on going to a concert in Chicago, but I can't wait to come to your video game tournament. Like I've never competed in a Halo tournament before. So this was like a thing. And suddenly our, you know, local public safety officials are like, hey, we got to can this because we've got a cop telling us this is a hazard to public safety. You're a 17-year-old kid trying to convince us that games are like okay to happen in the high school. Like, who are we going to listen to? So, and there's some additional like political details at that time. My school district had a superintendent that, I mean, you could probably Google this. She was doing a number of things that like people in the community were not stoked about and teachers were not stoked about. So like, it was kind of this perfect storm of a situation where like, happened to have a police officer who wasn't a fan of video games, like was eating whatever the media was telling him that Jack Thompson was saying, right? Whenever there was some sort of act of violence and it was blamed on video games. School district superintendent who was like a little overreaching with some of her authority and kind of overzealous to get involved in this. And then you've got, did we lose John?
Yeah, his computer does that. You can keep going though. He'll be back. Yeah.
Then we have a situation where it's like, all right, all these kids are trying to self-organize and are organizing this video game tournament. And it just sort of ended up being this perfect storm where they shut down my event. And my local newspaper ran a story with the angle of like local teens try to do something productive, get shut down by the man. And someone uploaded that story to Dig back in the day, which was sort of like the modern day Reddit, right? At the time.
I was a big Dig user for a little bit. I know.
Yes. This is like back in the day. And to be honest, at the time, I really didn't know what Dig was. Like I was, my knowledge of like internet culture was pretty limited. Somebody uploaded to dig.com, and a bunch of people in the video game, like the broader video game industry, found out. So like Marty O'Donnell, who composed, we were just chatting about him actually. He wrote the music in the Halo franchise. He actually wrote in a letter to our local newspaper and was like, I challenge anyone to find content in Halo that's worse than what you'd see on primetime television. Bungie Studios will pay Zach and his friends any money they lost trying to organize this event. He's like, I just totally stuck up for us. And it was really inspiring as a gamer, because suddenly our story sort of went viral at the time. I had all these random people on the internet who would reach out to me, like on Facebook, MySpace. Dude, heard about your tournament being canceled. Like, that's ridiculous. My church youth group hosts Halo tournaments all the time. Like, what's going on out there? And, as a lifelong gamer, the reason I mention all those other details about playing sports and whatnot is because, growing up, there were always these negative stereotypes and perceptions around games and the gaming community. And I had to confront that pretty frequently, because I had coaches who would give me flack about enjoying games. I had teachers who would give me flack because every presentation I wanted to give in class had to do with video games. And thankfully, my parents at home, didn't really care too much, right? Because of like their career pathways to some extent. But there were always these negative stereotypes around games. And I was personally frustrated by that, because I didn't feel as a gamer this was representative of what games can be and are in a lot of ways. So I thought, look, I still want to host my video game tournament. I've done all this work to organize everybody. Let's find a new venue, and let's instead take any money we were going to make from ticket sales and we'll donate to a charitable cause, and at least demonstrate, actually, here's what happens when gamers get together around what we're excited about. It's not a hazard to public safety. It can be a force for public good. Like, let's do a fundraiser and make a difference. Yep. And so as a young person, it's funny because I joke about how, like, in some ways, Gamers Outreach was kind of founded out of spite, like, trying to like, get back at this cop and say, hey man, F you, like, look what we can do with games. But in sincerity, like, as a young person, I had never really been involved in a philanthropic cause. And I realized later, unless people have a personal connection to a cause or make that sort of initial leap of faith to get involved, everybody starts out at some point in their lives in a place of inactivity. And I think what's so powerful about games is that it's actually a way to connect with each other and communicate some of these topics. Like, through games, we're all having this conversation right now on this podcast because of games, right? Yeah. We would not have met if it wasn't for this shared activity that we all enjoy and can participate in. So that's how Gamers Outreach was started. That's the origin story. I always spend like probably too long telling that, but I just think it speaks to sort of this cultural moment in games. I don't think that's some of those topics don't get discussed as often anymore. Once in a while, you're seeing something on the news pop up, like Donald Trump said something a number of months ago. Slasher, who's like an esports reporter, got on Fox and was like, talking about it. What's funny, if you fast forward 14 years, so we work in the hospital, and that's really what we should spend the majority of time talking about. But one cool thing, years later is, we had the chance to go on the CNN Heroes program. And so every year CNN does this like charity gala where they'll recognize different, nonprofit leaders, and they'll kind of share the work they're doing through this like televised broadcast. And Gamers Outreach was one of like 10 organizations globally to be selected to be represented on this show. That's awesome. So we go out, and it was amazing, really cool experience. CNN was super gracious. And it's just cool to know that, like, hey, now we've literally got like a trophy from the media. It says like gamers are heroes. And like, just to have that opportunity to show that other side of the story, like, hey, I'm cool. If people want to get on the news and bash video games, like, look, freedom of speech, more power to you, say whatever you want. But it'd be wonderful if we also could get like the other viewpoint, and let's get some folks on here that are using games for good and can talk about like all the benefits of this incredible technology we all have. So anyway, from like a sort of a gamer, like what's the word I'm looking for? From like a sort of a gamer identity standpoint, that's, I think, been a big part of our story as we've come of age. But more importantly, we accidentally discovered that games can make a tremendous difference in the hospital environment. So as I started raising money for charity, somebody connected me with my local children's hospital. And in the process of just having conversations with them and sharing how we wanted to raise money through our gaming event, they requested a bunch of video games. And we discovered that actually they needed a way to provide kids with activities. And it turns out not only was that true in that one hospital, it's actually true globally as well. There's this major challenge in healthcare facilities when it comes to providing play at scale. And it just so happens that as a gamer, this is like a super obvious problem to solve because we all play video games and can say like, look, and again, we've all experienced this in our normal lives. I was sick for the whole summer and like, also like kind of practically realize like the value games provided to me during that time. Games can enable play regardless of age, regardless of number of patients, regardless of like staff availability in these hospitals. And as we've talked about, like someone who's worked in the game industry, who's worked at GameStop, who's just generally passionate about games, to me, it's like, wow, here's a moment where we as gamers can apply all this knowledge we have in a way that is going to be transformational to the healthcare space. Perhaps ironically so, because of how often like games traditionally used to be bashed around, around that connection. But like in sincerity, it's look, I mean, all of us play games and games are a part of our lives. Being a healthy human being is also like a great, thing to consider in life generally, but it hasn't the game, whether you play games or not, doesn't necessarily have to do with that. That's just how you spend your time. So anyway, that's a lot of topics combined into one, but just to say that there is this massive opportunity for us to make a major difference in hospitals. And that's been my quest so far. I discovered this and for the last 14 years have been working to try to solve this problem.
It's pretty awesome how that entire story kind of comes full circle because you wouldn't have really even ended up in this situation if you hadn't gotten sick and been like, I'm just going to go play games because I got nothing better to do right now.
It's funny because I used to never tell that part of the story until I did accidentally. And someone was like, "Why don't you start with that first?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess you're right." Because literally, I wasn't in the hospital, and I'm very clear. Like,
you probably just had a cold or something, But still,
but had that not happened, I literally would not have spent that much time on Mortal Kombat, which would have not caused me to host an esports tournament. And so it's just all relevant because it wraps back around to like every piece of what I'm talking about here is like. You've got people who are in the hospital where clearly games are a benefit. You've got folks who are gamers that would probably love to be involved in something like this, but just don't know how. And so I've kind of been through all those steps and can say, guys, like, let me help us move in this direction. It could be really, really massive. So,
I would say I'd point anybody listening to your I think it's your 10-year anniversary of Founders video, which is brilliant. It's beautiful. It's really well sculpted. But the thing I got from that, and even hearing you tell it again, is like all great charity comes down to like a simple idea. And I feel like everything you do is still the same thing as that young kid, which is just games can be good. And you're bringing the idea of video games to people who couldn't have it beforehand. And I love that. And I was talking to John about this before the show started. It was a lot of companies now have a little bit of an identity problem when they're trying to get into the game space because they're usually business people that just kind of start, but say they played games when they were younger. And the thing I love about Gamers Outreach is that it's in your identity from the time you were a young person. And so it makes it almost like you must be like the perfect fit for any kind of gaming charity because of that. And that's just not me gushing, but I just think it's good to see someone who's in the space who literally has from a kid been like, this is what I want to do. And that's what I like about Gamers Outreach a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that street cred, I mean, it comes from also like organically. We host a LAN party every year, Gamers for Giving, and to be honest with you, it's not the most efficient fundraiser per se. We're like, well, we started because we want to host a video game event, so this is as much as what we do as our programs are, and we feel like it's part of our identity. Like we see ourselves as a gaming brand that happens to work in the hospital environment, and we're trying to build tools and provide services that make games easy to manage and available in these healthcare spaces. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Justin. I mean, we're amped to do the work as gamers. I mean, again, like all of us enjoy being on Twitter each day, like tweeting about games, talking about games. And so to be able to like see our enthusiasm have this sort of impact is like crazy inspiring and fulfilling. And so it's fun. It's fun for all of the reasons, So yeah, we're really amped to be a part of it and super grateful when people join aboard for the ride.
Well, and it's probably an awesome way to get like lower level donations and get a large group of people to embrace the idea that games can be used in a positive way to do that giant LAN party. So even though it may not be the most cost effective measure, then if you were to like maybe just, go after specific targeted large donors, it's still a really cool part of your mission to get everybody to kind of see the vision that gaming can do good.
Yeah, and the good news is like over the years, what's happened, and not to our credit by any means, but streaming has become a thing. Like when we first started hosting LAN parties, really the only way to sort of raise money was by selling tickets or recruiting sponsors. And when you're a grassroots LAN party, anyone who's run a LAN knows like, okay, you've got to rent enough space for people to come into a big room and put all their computers together like that. You've got to lay down network equipment. So you need network engineers who like know how to connect people and a certain number of people. And then you also have to pay for the equipment to do that or find it. And you have to know what all that, so you have to have all these sort of like prerequisites just to put a LAN party together. And bringing all those people together can be challenging in itself. And then rounding up the resources to do all that. And then whether or not it's like really worth the effort. It's kind of why you just don't see a lot of LAN parties exist aside from like Waycon and DreamHack and like, a handful of like grassroots events. And some of those have unfortunately gone by the wayside, because people age out. They're like, this is a lot of work and don't really feel like doing it anymore. Thankfully for us, it kind of became our job. So we're still doing it. But if it hadn't been for streaming, honestly, the event from a fundraising standpoint would be really difficult because nowadays it's like the event is more of a backdrop. Like we really think now of the event as like a community event. Like for us, it's, hey, we want to get our supporters together, play games. We want to get people together we want to get people who are part of the gaming community into the same room, like feel this energy of like games being used for this purpose. Yep. And then we've been inviting some Twitch streamers and YouTubers who we're friends with, out to our event to broadcast as well. So yeah, I think as a nonprofit, like as we've been maturing, we're definitely exploring other revenue streams and ways to fundraise. But Gamers for Giving has become like a major part of our identity. And it's, fast forward over a decade behind QuakeCon and DreamHack, I'm pretty sure it's the third largest LAN in North America, maybe the fourth. I think PDX LAN just moved to a new venue. I think they may beat us out. But those guys are great over there. So, and I think that's assuming they're still going on too. I mean, COVID has thrown everybody for a loop.
COVID's definitely changed the entire landscape for live events, and I would assume even just nonprofits, just with the fact that whenever people get a little more tight on budget, they start having to justify every single line item. Like my computer just blue screened in the middle of this call, and it's now the second time it's happened. So I'm actually kind of happy about that, because now I could finally justify to my fiance, yes, this is a business expense.
Yeah.
I need to buy a computer that's not from 2014.
Very important.
So it's like I need to kind of upgrade the system a little bit, swap out a few parts, because I think I have a power supply issue at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a reasonable excuse to me. Yeah, definitely. Man, it's done so many things, right? It's sped up some things. It's forced some very well-run businesses to close that really otherwise wouldn't have. Some of that's luck, just luck of the industry you're in. I mean, in the video game industry, it's very fortunate that digital distribution has become more mainstream in recent years, and companies are able to still push out games. I think we were chatting about this a little bit. Funny enough, speaking of Clubhouse the other day, we were chatting about how the video game industry this year, I mean, you're probably going to see less games released just because everything's being delayed. It's harder for teams to work on things from home. For our case in the nonprofit world, last year somehow, and I say this very thankfully, ended up being our strongest year to date from a fundraising standpoint. And programmatically, it's kind of weird for us. We have one foot in the video game industry and one foot in the hospital environment. And so the good news is that in the pediatric world, no children's hospitals were really seeing kids coming into the facility due to COVID. So, but they were still enacting social distancing measures. And so kids who were like once well enough to go to a playroom are suddenly being isolated, to their rooms. And so therapy is happening in room, treatment is happening in room. visitors are limited, if allowed at all, and also volunteers aren't being allowed into hospitals.
Mhm.
So we're seeing volunteer shortfalls across these these facilities as well. Because of that, staff are looking to games as a way to provide kids with activities, both from a recreational standpoint purely, as well as a way to honestly save some staff bandwidth. You know, if you're like a single nurse working on a floor and you're responsible for X number of rooms, like you can only spend so much time with each patient per day. It's not like you can sit down and play video games with them for a couple hours and then go to the next kid. I mean, there are multiple people who need you sometimes at the same time. So that's where it's interesting that games are serving this role right now. And we've had more requests for our devices than ever because of it. And so thankfully, we've been in a position where our team was working remotely prior to the pandemic. We all work from our homes, and we were set up in that sort of way to be able to like still provide the service without any sort of interruption. And then the fundraising from the community, you know, helped push a lot of that forward as well. So we ended up having some really great fundraisers, thankfully. To be honest with you, from our standpoint, I'm a little nervous about this year just because I think budgets that were created in 2020, you know, with
already had it put in as a line item. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2021, it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know if we'll do as good as we did last year, to be honest, but and we're still we have a number of things that are coming down the pipeline that we're really proud about. Like we've been working on the last number of months trying to focus on. So we've got like a new website coming out. We've got a couple new programs. So regardless of fundraising, I mean, like we're doing everything that I would probably know how to do at this moment. But I mean, some nonprofits have like gone under entirely. I mean, if you were a nonprofit that relied on a gala or a golf outing or something physical, I mean, you know, it's been a really tough year. And it'll be interesting to see if like there's a really quick swing back. You know, we might have the opposite issue where like maybe next year nobody will want to do anything online. It'll all be, you know, like, oh my gosh, we haven't been golfing forever.
I can see someone in person.
Yeah. So it very much could. I could see it being a pendulum effect where it swings back that way. But we'll see. I mean, I think regardless, like a big lesson from all this is being on the internet is just hypercritical, right? I mean, if you're a restaurant, being able to reach your customers through some sort of app or online mechanism, hugely critical. Diversifying those ways to communicate with people is of massive importance. And it just so happens as gamers, you know, we've been doing that for a number of years. So really interesting, strange times all around. And obviously that's not to, you know, mention, you know, the people who've been sick or have lost loved ones all throughout all this. I mean, I'm just chatting from like kind of this gamers average paradigm here, but just a really crazy time all around across the board.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things where thankfully with games, you do have that ability to still kind of have that sense of community and still be able to interact with people. Because I mean, I live in my apartment, you know, in New Smyrna. I used to work in Orlando. I don't commute anymore. There's no point because I'm trying to at least isolate as much as possible with that kind of stuff. And, you know, you lose that sense of being able to talk to people, you know, being able to have conversations like this, whether it's on, you know, a Zoom call or something like that, or even just be able to pick up a game like Valheim. We've just been grinding in that with a bunch of the guys from the office, you know, and it's enjoyable. It's a good time to just be able to still feel like you get that human interaction to some extent, you know?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's, well, actually I need to do a quick plug. Do you have a home server you've been playing Valheim on?
I do.
Okay.
I do as well.
Okay. I also installed my own. I spun up my own server a couple of days ago, and I've been trying to recruit friends to.
Nice.
Shoot me the seed,
pop
man.
in sometime.
I'll jump in.
Okay, cool. I need help building. Yeah, I'm by myself, and I'm like, I guess I need to blast this out on Twitter a little bit more and try to recruit some.
We're technically on our third server. So I started one, then my friend started one, and then we took our combined knowledge and we started another one. So
yesterday we built a great hall, and just to get enough stone, I built a moat around a mountain, which I didn't even know you could do.
Oh yeah.
It took a while, but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I'll just pop on like an audiobook or a podcast and just kind of listen to something I was going to listen to anyway. And then this just becomes that kind of like mindless grind that you're doing to like kind of keep your brain going, you know?
Yeah,
that's just one of those nice ways to kind of like, you know, chill at the end of a day. You know what I mean? Because like, for me in particular, like the majority of the gaming I do anymore, honestly, I probably play like chess on my phone more than I do anything, because it's just a way to kind of like relax a little bit. Like I don't really have the kind of time I used to have to just like dive in and play 100 hours of like, I don't know, Skyrim or something. At this point I'm kind of like, all right.
I think Valheim's doing something that every game wishes they could do, which is it taps into that thing, like you mentioned, John, of you just start playing that game and you don't even realize the time. You're just enjoying the thing. And Minecraft used to be the same way. It's just you just play it, you just do it, you build stuff, and you're like, oh, that's great. Valheim now has that and just this really fun adventure thing. So time passes and you hang with the friends and you build stuff. It's they've tapped into something so unique so fast, and I love that for them. So
well, I'll be honest, when I first jumped into the game, I was literally talking. Chance is actually in our chat right now. I was literally talking to Chance, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, Chance, I don't understand this game. It just feels like Ark with all the cool shit stripped out, And then the more I started playing it, I'm like, wait a minute. It also has all the bad stuff stripped out. Like everything terrible about a game like Ark is gone. I no longer have to stress about the fact that if I'm playing that game, it becomes a full-time job. Back when I used to play it so much, I had to make sure that those dinos got watered. It's like having a dog. You have to walk them. Like you had to pop in, you had to feed your stuff. You had to, farm your plants. You had to make sure that, you're not getting raided by somebody. And it's like, you really want to just hang a sign on the door that says like, hey, I'm no longer like 18. I can't literally be on here 24/7. Like, please don't do that. But it's like when I started playing this, I'm like, wait a minute, I just kind of level up by doing stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't have to eat. It just kind of helps me if I do. That's cool.
A lot of what we're talking about, kind of shifting gears back to the hospital land.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're talking about is it's good to reflect on, because it speaks to the value of games in our day-to-day lives. And all this stuff I feel is like even more true in the healthcare space. I mean, we're working with kids and families sometimes that are in these hospitals for months. Like they basically, like the hospital room becomes an apartment in some ways. A story I tell somewhat regularly, we had a kid we were working with who was waiting on a heart transplant, and he was in the hospital for 9 months. And during that time, the doctors wouldn't let him leave his room or the hallway outside of his room, because they were worried if something were to happen to him, they were basically gonna have to try to keep him alive. And thankfully, like, happy ending to the story. He had a surgery, everything's good now. But his mom was telling us, like, honestly, if it wasn't for Minecraft, which is Valheim is basically like Viking themed Minecraft.
Same kind of concept.
Yeah, I mean, this mom was saying, like, look, if it wasn't for Minecraft, like, my son would have gone insane, because at least he could play on this digital playground that exists, where he has access to his friends. He has access to opportunities to socialize in this environment where he's stuck. And it just speaks to like this value of games as a source of connectivity. Are they the only source of connectivity? I mean, that's where I would take the other side and say, no, of course not. Like, I mean, going out to the bar with your friends, going to the gym, rock climbing, doing all those, it's all part of a holistic life. And that's where I think, like, sometimes it's lost in the conversation. Like, and I know people mean well when they say this, but like oftentimes the word escapism is used to kind of describe this sort of benefit of games. Like, hey, I'm trying to escape from something. Personally, I think of games as a form of enrichment. Like, I try to avoid using escapism in the sense that I'm not really trying to escape anything when I play games. Like, I enjoy life. I see games as being additive to my life. Like, when I play games, I'm socializing with my brother who might be in another state, or I'm playing with friends, right? And so to me, it's like I see games more as a form of enrichment. And it's like, so you can go out and, do all these things in normal life and also play games as well. And that's part of I mean, it's magical that we can all talk to each other right now through like basically sand at the end of the day. People who put the hardware together, it's absolutely magic that transferring video is possible. Graphics are possible. That's all part of life. Like, it's amazing for us to enjoy and explore this like incredible technology, and doing it through play, I think is fascinating. And in the healthcare world, it's just so obvious that like games provide this source of recreation. Games provide kids, even in a lot of ways, like another way to heal, and like games can help improve patient outcomes. And I can talk about that as well if we want, but I just see games as this digital sandbox. Like when you're growing up as a kid, you maybe there's a like, and when I was growing up, there was this like park next to my neighborhood, and I could go to the park and I could hang out in the swing set. But the only other kids I could play with were the kids who lived in my neighborhood, right? So you're sort of physically limited by geography. Well, games are like that park, but they are global. Like suddenly you're not limited. Your sandbox is now a digital sandbox, and you don't have to just play the games with kids in your neighborhood. You can play with the entire world. And so suddenly if you're the one kid who likes Final Fantasy and all your other friends like Madden, like that was me actually. I mean, I was like on the lunch table. You can go into the world and find the other kids who like Final Fantasy. Like you're not limited by, the luck of where you happen to be growing up. You don't have a choice in that matter. So as an adult, you do. And through games, you do as well. You have that flexibility. So there's a lot of incredible potential around games. And I think, like I said, for that reason, like I really see games as a form of scaling play inside hospitals. And our whole organization exists to help hospitals adopt this technology, and then also help educate them in terms of like how it's deployed and how to use it. So we're all pretty amped about it.
Do this is just a question about the carts, because I think they're fantastic, but do hospitals allow them to connect with other young people in the same hospital? Like, do they give you guys, or is it all like they play the game that they want to play? Like, do they have that interconnectivity with the other young people in the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is it always depends on the hospital.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So we have right now we have 2 programs at Gamers Outreach. So I'll back up even a little bit. So I started that Gamers for Giving event that I mentioned earlier, and that evolved to being a fundraiser to support providing games in the healthcare space. So we hosted that first event. Thankfully, it went well. We sort of benefited from like the tailwind of the press from like my canceled Halo tournament. And then I kind of had a choice to make where I said, okay, well, am I done? Or, is there something to this? And I felt like, well, look, this is really fun. Let's keep going. Like this was a good experience. I had fun. We had all these people came out. They had a great time. It's doing good for the community. And at the time I was like looking at going to college. I knew I wanted to work in the video game industry, but never intended Gamers Outreach to be a full-time job. It was just like, let's work on this. And as long as it's not interrupting the rest of my life, like we'll keep it going. At some point, it did start interrupting the rest of my life, and that's when it became a full-time job about 6 years ago. But for the last 14 years, I've been working on it. And then in 2015 is when I ended up leaving. I was working at Corsair and ended up quitting Corsair to work on Gamers Outreach full-time because we started getting enough support. In that time, as we've learned more about the healthcare world and hospitals, we developed 2 programs that right now we have a focus on basically 2 programs, and we're trying to address a handful of problems that exist in the hospital. So let me just talk about those problems first. The first is hospitals often, first off, there's an awareness challenge. So there are some hospitals that still, for a variety of reasons, don't really think about adding video games to the overall healthcare experience or the patient experience that exists in their facility. That might be for a number of reasons. Maybe it's just staff awareness. You might have a bunch of people who are super great taking care of kids, but don't necessarily play games themselves. And even if they do, they're not really in a position where they're like actively championing it in their hospital, right? So that's kind of like topic number one. That's more like a cultural thought leadership issue. And there's a lot of work to be done on that front. The second issue that kind of exists, and these are sort of simultaneous, right? The second issue is that, let's say you have a hospital that does want to provide games to kids, or you have enough staff at that hospital that like clearly see the value. They don't often have the infrastructure or the equipment to make video game content available at all. Yep. So maybe there aren't TVs in every room, maybe there aren't consoles. And then the third prong that we've sort of noticed is, okay, even if those first 2 things exist, often hospitals don't have the staff in place to actively manage equipment once it's deployed. So if you install an Xbox in every single room of a hospital, that's great. But the problem that is going to arise is that somebody's going to have to go room to room on all those consoles, update the devices over time, make sure kids aren't deleting games and such, like updating content. So there's some level of active management that's incurred anytime this technology is deployed. It's kind of like if you were to build a computer lab for a college and you didn't have any like IT worker at the computer desk each day to like manage whatever the students are doing, right? It would just we just had a bunch of stuff, and it would like maybe still sit in the boxes until someone came along to take responsibility for it. So right now we have 2 programs that are trying to address all these various challenges in different ways. The first is Project Go-Kart, which you mentioned. We construct these portable video game kiosks called Go-Karts. It's just an acronym, Gamers Outreach Kart. It seemed clever at the time, so
it confused me at first. I remember the first time I heard it, I thought you guys were giving out go-karts to hospitals, like a live action Mario Kart, and I was like, man, that's brave. And then I delved in deeper and I saw that what it was, which is still amazing.
Always, yeah.
Almost like the new AR Mario Kart. I don't know if you guys have ever tried it. But
I haven't tried it.
What I'd imagine at that point.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, so I wonder, part of it is that we didn't put we didn't put dots between G and O. At the time, it was just like an aesthetic choice, to be honest. I was like, oh, it's kind of, I think it looks silly with the dots, so like, let's just not do it. But I also think it's sometimes a conversation starter. And now we also have like all these like fun puns about racing, and we actually get support, funny enough, from like an actual racing team. There's awesome. Like an aspiring IndyCar driver, and he's like, oh, this is awesome. So, but the gaming carts, we build these kiosks, and they are basically like all-in-one portable gaming carts that can be wheeled room to room in a hospital. So there's like a monitor, there's a little storage cubby for like an Xbox or a PlayStation, and then the whole apparatus kind of like there are wheels at the bottom, so it can wheel room to room in the hospital. And it's actually made with a lot of the same materials that are used in other types of medical equipment. So we use like UL graded plastics. We're using UL certified power strips and like stuff that's all hospital grade equipment. The wheels are hospital grade as well. Like the casters are literally like built for like going over elevator bumps and everything else. So the kiosk, basically, if you don't know anything about video games, the good news is that this cart, everything is self-contained. Like if you don't have hardware in your hospital, if you don't have monitors, if you don't have gaming, you can just, all you need is this kiosk, and all you need to know is to plug it into the wall and hit the on button. And most kids can kind of take it from there. So the go-karts are really like a hardware solution to this problem of, let's just help games exist in these facilities where the availability of tech and infrastructure like varies across the board. So we started creating these carts, and those are kind of what we're most known for. And those have been like, when we first started, we were really only building like one a year, right? Like 2008, 2009, basically 2008 to 2015, we were only building like a small handful of carts each year because it was all passion project, right? We were just kind of like, fundraising when we could. 97% of the money we've raised since 2008 has happened in the last 5 years. Oh, wow. So just to kind of give you like a sense of, Gamers Outreach has existed for quite a while, but it wasn't until like, we started like, okay, let's really focus on this and make it a thing, that suddenly like a lot of the growth has happened since 2015. So like in 2015, I think we had a presence in about 7% of pediatric hospitals nationwide. Fast forward to the end of 2020, we now have a presence in 90% of pediatric hospitals nationwide. Yeah. Wow. So there's been like tremendous progress in that time. And there's a variety of factors, that have contributed to that. So anyway, those are the gaming carts we construct. We basically ask for $3,500 per unit. So that's like the donor commitment to build the cart, install the games, equip it with the console, the monitor, the controllers. And we literally hire somebody whose like job it is to like, add content to Xboxes and prep all that stuff. And then that also includes the freight shipping to the hospital. So we'll ship it to the hospital. It comes on a big pallet. They take the box up, the cart's already assembled. And we provide setup support as well. So we have a team of folks who like literally right now as we're talking actually are like kind of available to answer questions for hospitals, answer support tickets. And then we replace things as well. So if the hospital calls us and is like, oh, we cleaned a controller one too many times with bleach, we'll say, okay, great. Well, thankfully we have resources at the moment. We can supply you with a new controller, no problem. So the 3,500 commitment is an encompassing amount that like allows us to provide not only the cart, but like the holistic service that goes with it. And it's really cool. If you stream and raise money to build a gaming cart, we can actually donate them to hospitals of donor preference, and you can very tangibly see it. It's like, wow, my cart is there. Like the hospital gave me photos. So that's kind of one of the cool byproducts of our work, is that it's just very tangible, and it's very obvious to see our progress even if you just donate $10, like you can see like we're clearly progressing year over year. And then if you actually raise enough to build a cart, like you can literally build a cart. Like we just had a call today with that Fortnite player Booga. Yeah, so he donated a cart, actually a number of carts to hospitals, and they've got like his little logo on them, in the hospital, and they're rolling around. And he's been super generous with his community and such to raise money. So it's really cool. It's cool to see gamers being involved in that way. The second program we have, and I'll say this, and I can kind of like take a breather here. We have a program called Player2, and it's a volunteer initiative. And basically, we're trying to address that knowledge gap I mentioned, which exists in hospitals. And that is, we're inviting video game enthusiasts to actually come to hospitals, volunteer, play games with kids, solve tech support issues, distribute games. And they're basically a complement to a hospital's existing IT team. So now suddenly as a gamer, if you're like any of us and you've played games all your life, it's super easy to walk into a hospital and be like, oh yeah, I can update the Xbox for you. Yeah, this kid wants to build a world of Minecraft. I can help him out and play with him for a few hours while like a nurse is doing rounds, no problem. And then you go through all the training that volunteers do, and you go through all the background checks and immunization shots and such. So it's been a really amazing program. Actually, a number of the applicants who've like made it through, some of them were like med students that needed to put hours in. So it kind of worked out. Like they're big gamers. They're also like, they need to do some rounds as part of their studying. And so, or they just were interested in volunteering generally. So it's been a really phenomenal program. We've had some really amazing stories emerge from it. Unfortunately, it's on pause right now due to COVID. We've been still doing some remote stuff, but it really won't come back until like it's safe to go back into hospitals on a volunteer basis. So those are the two programs we have right now. We have two more that we're going to be announcing during Gamers for Giving, which I'm excited about, which kind of solve the challenges I mentioned earlier in I think a more scalable way. But you'll end up seeing like each of these programs kind of like addresses like a different bullet. Like, cool, you don't have hardware, go-karts. Okay, you need knowledge workers, Player2. The next two programs, Portal and SafePoint are what they're called. I'm sort of like pseudo announcing them here, but like this Portal thing is like basically a software platform we're building, and it'll like enable games at scale. And so it's like, okay, you have hundreds of patient rooms, we can like let all of them play games. And then SafePoint is we're like creating these like really high-tech vending machines that are going to go into hospitals and be like distribution hubs for like games and fun swag items and things kids can walk home with. So we're going to explain more of it. We have very loose NDA policies at Gamers Outreach. We've honestly like people about these programs.
If you're watching this, you're now NDA.
Yeah, you can't say nothing.
Yeah, but it's like it's not going to make full sense until you like see what we've been working on.
No, exactly.
We're making like a couple videos to like show it off. So I'm a big fan of building in the open anyway. I feel bad for these game developers that like can't talk about like what they're doing. I'm really bad about like keeping secrets. So I just like I want to share what we're excited about. So it's gonna be really cool. We're gonna announce it all though during Gamers for Giving, and it'll make a lot more sense when our event happens this March.
No, that's awesome. And one of the things I love about the different programs is it kind of gives a very clear barrier of entry for somebody who wants to get involved. It's like if you're someone like a streamer or a business and you can, pay for a cart, that's something very tangible that you can see that is doing good. And if it's something where, okay, I don't have money, but I got time, you can volunteer your time and you can still, help people. And I think that just kind of harkens back, to bring everything full circle. You said from the start, not to say this was out of spite, obviously it was to help people, but it's like you've basically expanded an entire platform now that everybody can use to help people. It's not just your org, it's anybody who wants to get involved in a sense, and that's awesome to see.
For sure.
You've created the vehicle and now they can just kind of pour the gas in.
I had a question. The carts are based off of Xboxes, right? That's the console that's inside there, or is that the original design?
So the carts are capable of fitting any console.
Yeah.
It just so happens that so we're not exclusive to Xbox.
Okay, that's what's more my question. Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of people like at Xbox are fans of what we do, and they will sometimes donate consoles to us. And it's just more convenient to put an Xbox on it most of the time. The other reason is that just from a gaming standpoint, like oftentimes when we deliver go-karts, we're primarily thinking about teenagers in our heads at least. And like Nintendo games, tend to appeal to a younger audience. Although I say that, and I immediately hesitate because all of us still. I mean, I'm sure all of us.
About to say, I played so much Animal Crossing during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness for Animal Crossing, right? So I say that very like, we're in a different world now where like all of us still play all games. So, but Xbox tends to, for hospitals at least, tends to be something that like is a little more appealing to like a teenage demographic. And oftentimes when people think about children's hospitals, they're thinking like little kids. So a lot of the donations hospitals get are usually like, oh, we got a new
audience.
Yeah, we got like a new toy. It's like meant for 5-year-olds, right? Yeah. Like, well, 17-year-old is like sitting here, like, like Call of Duty, like, can I get some?
They want to play Mortal Kombat, like Zach, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be honest with you, it's funny. Sometimes people ask, like, oh, do you donate like M-rated games to the hospital? It's like, to be honest with you, sometimes they request that stuff. Like, I mean, we usually when we donate the carts, like generically, we're always installing family-friendly content because you do have to be sent. There's all sorts of sensitivities, for a number of reasons in hospitals around games and such. But I mean, we really leave the policing up to the parents in the hospital. Like, we're not in the hospital. I mean, I'm not. We're obviously communicating with hospitals on a daily basis, but we're not. Like, I'm not walking around the halls of a hospital every day. I'm not like hands-on. That's what the healthcare workers. That's their responsibility. So we leave it up to them to decide that.
And when I think of what like every younger person I know is playing, like it's Roblox and Minecraft anyway, or Fortnite, and those three things are not like age specific, but you can just dump them in there, and then that takes care of a lot of your younger kids because that's what they want anyway. That's what the content they're watching is. That's what their content creators are playing. And it's awesome that you guys are able to kind of speak to a wide range there.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you fully. I mean, there's really space for all sorts of content in hospitals, and again, it just kind of comes down to what are the kids going through, what sort of accessibility is possible in the hospital. We work with some facilities where like internet doesn't even exist. There's a facility in Michigan that comes to mind immediately where kids don't have Wi-Fi and your cell phone reception is pretty questionable. Wow. So sometimes people will ask us like, oh, well, what about like NVIDIA's like GeForce streaming product or like xCloud or, until it was canceled recently, Stadia. All amazing potential. The challenge we run into is just like literally the bandwidth in these hospitals is like really varies across the board. And even hospitals where like internet does exist, like the minimum requirements for Stadia and xCloud. Well, I don't know about xCloud necessarily, but like Stadia for sure, like it's not possible to scale out across 500 rooms in the same location. So that to say, this product, I mean, John, you're familiar with it. I think I've shown you a little bit, but like Portal, our software platform, I think is going to address at least a good portion of that and enable still like as bandwidth limitations change or technology just evolves or hospital infrastructure improves, there'll be a lot of room to like integrate some of that stuff more easily. But also for the hospitals where like, wide internet connectivity is just not feasible for whatever means, whether it's a liability or a tech issue. There's some ways to work around that. So,
I think that last like 10-mile issue's always been the problem with anything when you start getting into cloud/internet-based gaming.
Yeah.
And then when you add it to scale at a single location that has that many people trying to use it, I just can't even imagine. I mean, the other day I was driving somewhere and there was a car accident. So we were like all kind of like parked on the road, basically waiting for it to get cleared up. I couldn't get cell service at all. And it's one of those things where, like once you have that many people all trying to do the same thing, it just gets chaotic. We're just not at the infrastructure level we need for some of that yet. And I always have a policy that I don't bring something up till somebody else does. So it's kind of funny that you did bring up Portal because I'm excited to kind of see where that does go. I've been able to kind of talk with Zach a little bit about that and kind of figure out some things there. So super, super curious to see where everything goes. And when you announce that at Gamers for Giving.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. I think it's going to solve a lot of challenges that have existed in hospitals. And it's really going to just come down to their willingness to integrate games with their facilities. And I think that's going to be an evolving conversation over the next number of years. So Yeah, we're amped. We're excited about this. Has become like, like I said, I didn't anticipate working on Gamers Outreach. It was a full-time job, and 6 years ago, it's kind of a funny story actually. The straw that broke the camel's back was I was working at Corsair, and my parents, a semi truck ended up showing up at. So somebody tried donating 900 Xbox consoles to us, and the semi truck showed up trying to like upload all these consoles, and you'd have to like find some old photos on our Facebook, but we had amassed like 5,000 or 6,000 donated video games in my parents' basement. So literally, like, at the time we didn't have money really for a storage facility, like resources were pretty tight. So we literally had this like what looked like the storage room of a Best Buy in my parents' basement, and all this equipment was there. And when this, when the semi truck's like looking for a place, like it's got pallets of Xboxes, my parents are like, yeah, this is the line. Like you can't keep this in the basement anymore. Like this is obviously becoming its own thing. And it just so happened that same day we had like a product launch at Corsair. And so my boss needed me for like social media stuff and just some other marketing things. But I was like, one phone with my boss, like, yeah, that sounds all good. Everything's looking good. With one phone with the semi truck driver, yeah, man, we're gonna have to reroute you to this this storage facility. And I just realized I'm not really being fair to my boss right now. Like they're paying me to do this job. I'm not really being fair to our donors. Like they're expecting like some level of activity with the org. I need to choose. And I had just recruited like a new board of directors at that time, and they were all like, look, Zach, we think you should quit your job, live at home with your parents, like suck it up, and just try to build this org for a little while and see where it goes. We'll all support you and try to make this happen. But try to make it a thing. We believe you can do it. And so that was it. I mean, I was in my mid-20s, had just finished college, had this really obvious pathway to like move to California, work in gaming. And but intuitively, it just didn't feel like what I wanted to be doing. And so I decided like, all right, I guess I'll quit, this career opportunity and work on Gamers Outreach. And, you can kind of literally, that's like that, the numbers I was referencing earlier, that's where like you can put that dot at the starting point and like see, thankfully what's been an upward trajectory thus far, hopefully continues, this year. But regardless, like overall the org, it's been very fulfilling to work on personally, despite like, I would say it's been easy. Obviously, like there's, you have challenges, even though it's fulfilling work and whatnot. Like it's like anything. There's challenges. There are up days, there are down days, and whatnot. But now it feels really good. I mean, we have a really clear idea of like the direction we're heading. I think we've done a lot of work to understand our identity, and I think a lot of the work, especially the last 6 months, is going to sort of become more publicly obvious. Post Gamers for Giving, once we like launch our new website and share some of these programs and just sort of how our thinking has evolved about solving these problems. So, awesome. Yeah, it's pretty cool all around.
I think that's a great point or place to just kind of wrap things up. For anybody who wants to support Gamers Outreach or get involved in some way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, anyone can check out our website, gamersoutreach.org. We actually, like I said, have a refreshed site coming in hopefully a few weeks. So check it now and check back again in about a month. There's obviously ways to donate. We've got some volunteer opportunities, remote volunteer opportunities available, so you can register and apply to be a volunteer. And then on Twitter and social media as well, at Gamers Outreach, we're pretty active on Twitter. We tweet almost every day. Facebook, Instagram as well, at Gamers Outreach. And those are some of the best ways to stay in touch.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Great talking to you.
And great conversation with you, Zach.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks a lot, guys.